Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It is, at least where I am, the 6th of November. This is the analytics section meeting. The first agenda point. So late last week, data retention came up. It was in the context of adding telemetry within the GDK. So we should start to figure out how users can set that. There's an issue for that I've linked below. What default value should be if users don't set that in the SDK. There is a policy issue that calls out 90 days, which is probably too short to retain product analytics data for users. But if somebody wanted to set it that short, they certainly could. So I listed a couple of existing issues here. Just wanted to kind of kick off that conversation because it is kind of a stage-wide or section-wide topic. We'll have a lot of things that we'll need to consider when it comes to this. And I also wanted to call out, it's another great example of we should remember that while we're using this feature to dog food a lot, we shouldn't build our features for only our use case and box ourselves in so that we only have a 90-day retention for users who want data in perpetuity and don't care about things that maybe we do as an org in using product analytics features.
Yeah, so I have the first point here or response to it. And so, or if anything, I'd like to kind of clarify, because we're talking about setting retention settings in the SDK, and my issue could involve that, but it is more geared towards, and I'll make a distinction, and I'm happy to redefine that, but just so that we're talking about the same things, I'm going to refer to customers as those consuming product analytics features or instrumenting their applications using our SDKs, and users as the people that the customers are actually collecting data on or the ones consuming their applications. And that's just so I can, when I'm explaining it, it hopefully makes sense. So when I wrote the issue, it was more to figure out what is the data retention policy for customers in the sense that how much data are we going to store for them and how much will they be able to query upon? I would agree 90 days, I think, is when we had a very, very vague idea and we were being very conservative. Having some of the preliminary cost data, I think we can well support one, if not two, if we really want to get to year-over-year comparisons, things like that. But we can start with the year because it's easier to extend that retention policy than to bring it in or make it shorter. So that's kind of where I was coming from for that. I can see where customers would want, and in that issue as well as, and from what I can tell from competitive analysis, there's always like a standard, like for example, Mixpanel has, I think, a 5-year policy. But Google has like a 2-year, but then you can allow the customer to define certain properties to have different retention policies based on data you're collecting on the users. So I guess to bring that back, we were talking about, or James, you're referring to like setting these retention policies in the SDK. I guess you wanted to start the conversation, of course, but like, is there a specific level you're kind of looking at to define this for? Because I just want to make sure, like, I just wanted to clarify, like, I'm looking at it from the customer perspective, and then it may funnel down into giving them the flexibility to define it for the users, because I can see where they will want that for, forget me requests or certain things that I think are dependent on us first defining at the customer level what we're going to be able to do. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, I wanted to start the conversation around what is a default? Because today we don't have capability within the SDK to set retention, from what I understand. So we should give users a thing default for what they want, and then think about further use cases of great, I never set one, but I only want to retain data for up to 90 days. Let me go purge a bunch of the data, re-instrument so that that's the 90-day retention. I have that set for my needs, and maybe that doesn't get set in the SDK, or maybe there's specific data that has a retention policy and other data doesn't. Is that something we want to talk about support for? Of all of your data has a date, an expiration date of sorts, or some of your data has an expiration date of sorts, which is going to be a probably big breaking change. Are there use cases that make sense for us to support that?
Yeah, and so I want to get to Sasha's point as well, but I just to kind of set perhaps to start the ball rolling for potentially how it would look implementation wise, I think we should start at the customer level for our like cluster management purposes to say, all right, let's start with the year. And that's the default. And then that is the first iteration as well, because I think that's going to be a blocker for being able to allow customers, for example, to say, well, okay, I know that you set a year for me, but in the purposes of my project, I can only hold on to data for 60 or 90 or whatever they define. And that would theoretically override that. So I bring that up because I think there's going to be a fair bit of work to be able to enforce any kind of global policy on data retention. And then we'd have to build upon that to allow it to respect customer settings, which is in this case, I feel like it would make most sense in the same places where they define all the other analytic settings like custom dashboards, repository, things like that, where it's like, okay, here's your default and you could override that. SDK seems like a whole other thing because that's now affecting like the user level, and I'm not I can see why they would want to customize from that, but to me that seems like a deeper level than just defining it or overriding the global default, if that makes sense.
What's what is the default retention for like CI analytics, like value stream dashboards, this type of data?
Like great
I don't think there is
I don't think we have one. Yeah.
The life of your account, probably. I guess
Yeah.
it's a separate use case or it could be considered a separate use case because GitLab is collecting data about our customers' usage. This is GitLab is storing data that you've collected about your customers' usage. We're going to have cases where we're also the ones who are storing that data for tools that dog food product analytics, which is the GTK case here. But that's not always it. And that's going to be a minority of and probably corner case type things as we consider broader. So Dennis, I think that a year makes sense to kind of start. We can push off using the GDK to set that, make that more of a global setting for all projects, and then start to figure out the granularity we need and leave the rest of the section back in as need be.
Sasha, did you want to bring up your point before I kind of respond?
Yeah, just it's retention and which retention to give. It's a complicated thing, and it's a hard question because the more data you store, the more expensive it is for the business. So you have to find like the right sweet spot. But and then offering configuration for customers, then it's more affordance and more work to do, the UI and things to maintain. What I've seen is if you have like a default which is relatively low, like a few weeks or a few months, and then for specific data, like maybe not the individual events, but metrics or like the top level metrics, you have like a longer retention, something that may make sense in terms of cost versus user value. But I don't know about like just food for thoughts, because I don't know about the cost of just in the data and everything for you, but I will assume it's like similar to what we're paying on the observability side.
Yeah, and that's kind of wanted to bring it back around as, we can't go into numbers, but it's possible that we can support a year or more from a cost perspective, but we also still need to figure out just in terms of running the service and making sure it's responding to customers at a reasonable level while as we go through beta and GA that, okay, we want to be able to do month over month and year over year, but how do we support that from the query perspective? And so I think for product analytics specifically, we can strive for a year first, see how that performs. We'll go to beta and we'll see how people are using it. And I don't want to say like, I would like to be optimistic to say we could extend that, but it could also go the other way because we might find there's some query performance issues when we're having tons of people viewing dashboards that may indicate that we have to go the other direction. So, but I think, James, to your point, I think we could start with a year. If we implement truncating of tables and it's set to a 90-day default, that hurts us as well because we're literally trying to fit in years of data to the .com project to be able to see how year-over-year performance would be.
One thing to remember, obviously, is we're going to be providing export functionality. So if people want to retain their data for longer, they can do. Obviously, with the legality aspects of, it's up to you to scrub data if people request to be removed from that data set, etc. So there is that aspect as well.
And that's a whole other thing too, because I saw in the issue for the GDK something about deletion and technically, like we don't have a way to support that beyond just them forwarding the request to us and then having to go in and delete it for them. So that would be a whole other thing of like how would we allow customers, for example, to process those kinds of requests? Do we, or is that something that gets forwarded on to us? Which that would also be a whole other conversation about how do we support that, or do we support that? So yeah.
For some more context, I would like to ask, do we already have some tool for enforcing this data retention, or will it only be developed?
I think we would have to figure out that solution, whether that exists in the configurator or if that's something else that has to be done, or if that's something that could be done purely on the ClickHouse side. We'll have to figure out what the right path forward is for that.
Okay. Thank you.
For what it's worth, I think ClickHouse has support for data retention periods. So we might be able to do it at the data layer, which would be ideal.
Yep. And I'll go through my issue again and add some more links there. I've since done some more reading in terms of like in terms of the behaviors, and we can obviously validate it ourselves in our UX research, but like Google Analytics, for example, it goes into detail of like if you update settings, when they will take effect or what happens to existing data. So a little bit of some inspiration to start off with. Cool, James, was there anything else you wanted to cover as far as retention? Awesome.
No, that was an excellent discussion. Thanks, everyone.
Nice. No, you've got next. Hello. Are you? I don't know if you're muted.
No, I can. Yeah, I added actually on the agenda. Yeah, basically, you already answered. I was wondering about this, the product analytics experiments. So as far as I understood now, we would like to add a toggle there, a checkbox, which will say like opt-in for product analytics, but it depends on also experiments. So that means that people need to enable 2 toggles, which is fine. I just wanted to make sure, because I think from the user perspective, it might be a bit confusing. We should probably document it, because if they go and enable only product analytics, but not the experiments, they will still see a checkbox, but they will not be able to use it. I think that's the current case for like other features like code assist and like AI. So it's not like specific to this feature, but just from user perspective, like one toggle based on another toggle, but in the UI there is no feedback of it. That was the reason that I asked this.
Okay, yeah. We should definitely document it when we implement it then. The idea, for just setting the context, is that the experiments toggle is tied to a number of different pieces of functionality, like AI assist or code suggestions. So the reason why we wanted a separate toggle for product analytics is if we, for whatever reason, onboard a number of users, we have service disruptions and we want to slow down the opting in of those features, that we can control that. And so if we were to shut off the experiments toggle entirely, then we'd be shutting off access to other functionality that is not, related to product analytics. So that's the background of why we want a separate toggle. But we should definitely document that, or give some type of user feedback that we to enable in order to actually opt to product analytics functionality.
And about, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
So what's the experience today for like the AI experiments if you don't have the first toggle? So if I say, no, I don't want any experiment or beta features, can I go select like code suggest or anything like that? Or is that not even?
It's all one toggle. It's all
code
one
suggest
toggle.
Is a separate toggle.
Is it?
Yeah. Code
Okay.
suggestions is its own thing that you can opt into. But I don't know what the experience is from I have to enable one and then I can enable the other. Ideally, that would be the case for us of if you don't have experiment and beta features turned on, you can't turn on product analytics if it's a separate thing.
Right. I was told it was all tied to one toggle. So
I think it used to be, but they're starting to break out. From what I understand, looking at some screenshots that Halil has provided and within the docs itself, or the docs themselves.
Okay. I mean, that's what we should, that's what we kind of wanted to model after. So I don't know, Max, I think you were closest to this at one point.
Yeah, but it says a lot that the work I did ended up being reverted because I broke production. Yes, my understanding was that the toggle was designed for AI in particular. So when I was working on it, a bunch of AI feature flags had been able to see the checkbox at all. But I don't know what the state of things is today because it moves so quickly.
Okay, so I think regardless of how the other features are doing it, we want to make sure that you have experiments enabled first off, and then you have a separate way to enable product analytics. So if code suggestions is doing that, then we should just model after that. But the bot, like to Hivo's point, yes, it will be 2 toggles. So we have to make sure that when we do implement this, that we have documentation updated to reflect that.
Okay, yeah, that's great. We can do it. I don't know exact behavior about code suggestions, like, but at least, for example, with the AI features, the third-party AI, it's exactly like this, that you need to enable both of them. So that we can follow that, enabling both of them. Okay, that's it for me.
All right, cool. Does anyone have anything else they'd like to bring up? It's good to see everyone. Have a good rest of your Monday, and rest of your week. And take care.
Yeah.
Bye.